Alrighty, welcome everybody to another fantastic data and API show. It is fantastic to have you all here today. We have got a show planned for you. This is as raw as it gets to the developer core. I am joined again by our fantastic colleague, Anjana. How are you doing today?
Hi, doing all right. Yeah, it's a nice sunny day here in San Francisco. Would love to know where everybody else is dialing in from. So please let us know in the chat, whichever platform you may be on, where you're coming in from today.
Yeah.
How are you over there?
Doing good. We actually we have a metric that we track starting now of the widest geographical spread of any particular show. So the wider the show's coverage is, the better. It looks like my camera's having a lot of fun with the auto white balance there. So that's special.
It's excited. It's just getting
it's
excited.
Just glowing over here. So we'll see if I can't manage to tweak that here in a little bit. But yeah, we've had a really an interesting first kickoff to our little mini series here on the Hasura Super App series, and today we'll be following up on that. A special shout out to our LinkedIn guests. We are live on LinkedIn for the first time, which is going to be fun. So any recruiters watching this, JavaScript developer, not a Java developer. We'll leave that to the audience for any of those questions. But Anjana, you might be a Java developer. Are you?
I have written Java. I don't know if that makes me a Java developer, but yeah, I like to think that there's a developer in every language within all of us. It's a polyglot kind of world out there, so we got to be polyglots too.
Polyglot punishment. Yeah.
Yeah, and so we've had some pretty exciting things happening over here on the Hasura side. Shall we, Jesse? You wanna tell folks about what's been happening on the Learn side of things?
Or? Yeah, on the happening at Hasura. So I'm gonna just quickly share my screen here, and we've had some minor technical difficulties. So here we are, all going to sacrifice the nearest small animal. Looks like that worked very good.
Excellent. Yeah. So.
And yeah, go ahead and explain.
No, this is really exciting. So this is the Learn site, right? These are all of our awesome tutorials. If folks haven't seen them, hasura.io/learn. Very exciting. There's intros to Hasura, more advanced courses on Hasura. There's GraphQL for all of the platforms, all of the front ends, etc. And yeah, so we've been making some progress on those, right? We have some new courses released, some new translations.
Yeah, we've got Japanese and Chinese now. So I will not attempt to say either of those those languages. But yeah, we have a massive, especially in Japan, we have a massive community over there. I know we have a growing one in China as well, but every time we release something, we get a lot of activity on the Japanese channels. So we've got a couple of colleagues over in that area, that part of the world. Hasura is a massively global company. We are fully remote and all over the place. More on that later. Yeah, so we're super excited to be able to offer this content for people that just weren't born speaking English. So that's what it is sometimes. So we're really excited about that. Some more content we got going on. We have, as always, been mentioning this the last few weeks, but we've got the HasuraCon coming up. So I would definitely encourage anybody who would like to come and have present your topic at HasuraCon. We've got the CFPs open. It's a great chance for you to be able to tell us what you're doing with Hasura. One of my roles here is I get to talk to a lot of users about what it is they're building. And it's just a lot of fun to actually be able to hear and see what people are doing. So pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, yeah, definitely folks should submit talks. Even if you've never broken at a conference before or submitted a talk before, we definitely want to hear from you. Any cool stuff you're working on, any aha moments you had. And we'll actually be helping you out with your talks if you need any support, or if you need any support writing a proposal for a talk, we're actually going to be hosting a community workshop for putting together CFP proposals. So the details on that we're going to share in the Discord. So be sure to join the Discord if you're not in there already. And we will be sharing updates on how you can join that CFP writing workshop in the next week or so.
And a little sneak peek. Anjana is actually leading the CFP workshop, which is going to be like you're getting like the best content possible. So if you had me leading that, you may not have very high odds at getting accepted. If I was telling you how to write CFP.
Come now, Jesse.
But no, Anjana's got a lot of great experience, and I'm actually attending because I'm super excited to learn about what it is that she has to offer. So great stuff.
Should be pretty fun. We're gonna hopefully get folks ideas generated and use each other as a sounding board to bump our ideas off of each other and figure out what would make a great proposal. And we'll go through all the steps of how to put that together.
Yeah, speaking of the community stories that we recently released as well, I wanted to call attention to the first published story that we have out, and I'm actually going to just wing this here inside of the URL bar here. But we have this the first release we have was from the Marshall project. And this is really a fantastic interview to hear from the other side, not me interviewing them, but from the other side about a team that's really working on just a real problem to solve using Hasura as sort of a data journalism ETL pipeline. It's a really great tool to be able, cool story to just see how they're shining a light on criminal justice actually in the US, which is a thing to shine a light on.
Totally.
And so I would have I really recommend you have a look at that. There's a video there. We have a lot of content. You can read up about it. And we have a whole bunch more stories lined up and coming out. So shout out to the Marshall project, which is a pretty cool thing to check out.
Absolutely.
And I think, the last thing or the last two things is so we have a jobs channel at the Discord where we've already mentioned the Discord project itself. And so if you are looking for work or you are looking for people to do work, that is a fantastic place in the community, and even all the technologies surrounding working with Hasura, right? Because we got all kinds of data management and all kinds of DBA sort of work and everything else that falls inside of that ecosystem. Is welcome to post there as long as you can somehow relate it to Hasura. We love to see what it is you have to offer. And this is just a place for everybody to grow, learn, and be able to deepen their experience with this tech stack that we all like to work with. But I will say, if you're like really into working with Hasura, well, then you may want to actually have a look at the open roles that we have. And I mean, I'm just going to do a slow scroll here. Like, we've got openings. so we got openings across the entire stack. We've got, HR, we've got finance, we've got all kinds of open applications. So it is a great time to join the company. Anjana has recently joined. I'm now just a little over a year. I can say from my side, I have really enjoyed my time being here. It's a fantastic company to be at. The people are just great. Anjana, can you reflect anything about new employee sort of experience?
Yeah, I mean, I have been here just about a month, I think, and the team has just been super welcoming. There is so much exciting stuff happening around the company. So many different teams working on really cool things, and it's just awesome to be able to hear from them and learn from them about all of these different angles on the technology side of things, on the business side of things. So it's just a really great and really broad-reaching team working on awesome problems. So a very interesting and fun place to be if you're looking for a way to spend your whole day with Hasura.
And I mean, that just sounds perfect. So, yeah. So, anyways, that kind of heads up what was happening in Hasura over the last week. That leads us to tonight's topic, which I'm gonna be real with you. We're about to see something. So um, we're running a version of the Hasura Super App, which we talked about last week. So if you have need some foundational background into what the Super App is, we go into that in more depth last week. But basically, it is a reference or a canonical reference app that just has everything you could want to know about structuring high level, high performant grade applications with Hasura, and all of the different data pieces that go around it, migrations, state management, user logins, the whole 9 yards. And what we're going to be focusing on today, which we looked at last week, was sort of this idea of architecting with actions. What we're going into today is going to be looking very a much deeper dive at how one of these actions is then created, surfaced inside of the application, specifically in login patterns, and then kind of how this all works together. So we did a little bit of that last week. We're going to go into a much deeper dive on it today. We looked at where all the pieces sort of plumb off into, but we're going to actually today look at the actual code of it. And yeah, that's today's show.
Yeah. And I know that, folks, I'm sure, are going to be interested in authentication in general too, right? And so I think one thing we would love to know is what other tools or frameworks around authentication folks are interested in, because we're putting together a whole course on this, right, for Learn. So as we go through, if you have questions and if you have thoughts of other things you'd love to hear about, please let us know in the chat or jump in Discord and let us know.
By the way, I'm just loving how realistic your background is, like actual office space, people walking back and forth.
I'm in an office.
Yeah, it's like this is real. This is live.
Yeah, that's happening. Getting back to it.
So what we're going to do is we're going to have a quick look over it. Now, just before the show started, I was visited by Colonel Panic. It's a really bad joke. But anyways, I was visited by Colonel Panic, and so I will have to now check to see if I can reboot my dev server here. So let's have a quick look to see if anything is actually running here. So it looks like we've got a couple of services that are up. I am going to see if I get any collisions running any of those as is. I might get a collision, so I'll have a look here. I'm going to go ahead and hop back over inside of my local Hasura instance. And right now, we're going to open that compose file here to have a look at the. This is the manifest for the entire application that we're building. All of our services are identified here in this file. And so what we're going to do is try and bring this up and see if any of my other instances of Hasura and other applications that Dev Education tends to have running in parallel on their machines will cause a conflict here. But let's go ahead and give a quick check here. So we'll go compose up E.
Yeah,
do I get them all?
Folks can, if you want to follow along at home or run this on your own, you can check out the repo on GitHub, and it has all the instructions for how to get up and running here. But of course, since it's a live demo, there are edge cases happening.
There are so many edge cases happening. So one of the issues that you may encounter when you are running the reference app, it is very much a real world example app, and there are thousands of actual rows inside of that database. So the problem with that is that it will potentially crash if you don't have the proper Docker settings set up. So I'm going to have to do a quick test here because it literally just died right as we were starting this show. So what we have here, if I run Docker PS, which basically just shows all my running containers, I can now check to see that I have the Next.js Commerce project, so Hasura Commerce Next.js. That's the service label from Compose, which is great. And then I have the migrations image running, but I do not. That is also from the Hasura e-commerce. So it looks like all three of those services are now running. So let me go ahead and see if the website's going to boot up here. Let me have a check. So localhost 3000 should still be running. That's great. This instance will not be running because this is the 9695. So this is, again, the proxied version of the backend. So what I need to do is to go into the Hasura metadata directory and use the Hasura CLI to boot up the proxied version, which allows us to track in metadata any changes we'd be making to the running instance. So we're going to go ahead and say Hasura console. And with that, it looks like it's going to complain about the admin secret is not set. So we're going to just go ahead and grab the admin secret of what it's looking for, which is supposed to be this one here.
Really
And we're
excellent
going to,
secret.
yeah, Hasura console, admin secret, and then we're going to just pass in that string here. So this is where I think it's probably a artifact from my Docker having crashed. So let's see here. Connecting to GraphQL engine server failed. What I want to do is I'm going to level up one here. All those instances we're currently running based off of this Docker compose file. So I'm going to go ahead and say Docker compose down and try to wind down all those running services and reboot them from fresh and see if that'll actually give it the kick in the head that it needs to wake up a little bit.
Turn
but this
it
is
off
really
and on again. The best debugging
reboot.
strategy.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, this is all nice and Dockerized, which makes it hopefully easy in most cases to get up and running and play around with the whole super app, tweak different parts of it. It's really yours to play with. So definitely don't worry. You can't really break things too badly because you can always start fresh. So definitely check out the repo and have take a stab at poking around the internals. And all through this month, like the different sessions that we're going to that we did last week and that we're going to go through in the next couple of weeks, we'll showcase different parts of the code base. But yeah, you can definitely poke around and see which pieces are kind of most relevant to whatever you're looking to learn.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so we're going to basically kind of run with this little instance we have here, which I'm hoping we're not going to get a kernel panic anytime soon. So we're going to see what happens. But what we've done is we've run the local version. At the moment, we basically launched all of our services. Minio, which is our S3 alternative. We have, or it's not alternative, it's an S3 compatible storage client. We've got the GraphQL engine itself. We have our Postgres database, which is sweating a little bit under the load because it's a local version that has not been given the proper amount of resources under my Docker settings. And we have Next.js, which is the actual front end that is serving as both the front end and serving as sort of my functions platform that is going to be handling all of my actions code on the back end. So that's essentially what we got going on here.
Gotcha.
All right. It looks like everything is still running.
Feeling a little better.
Feeling a little better. All right.
Excellent.
So let's dig into specifically, I would say, the login behavior. So to do that, let's go ahead and hop over to the application. And let's just try to follow the flow and just see if everything actually still works, because it's been a while since I've actually tested all this code. Let's see what we get. We're doing it live, everybody. All right, so we're going to come up with the username here. So we're going to go ahead and call this, well, we have to go with kernel panic now.
Love it. Love it.
English teacher, did I spell kernel correctly?
Looks right to me.
All right, good. And then we're going to go with kernel panic at Hasura.io, because I know that does not exist. We are going to go with password 1234, which looks like we have validation in place. I told you this is a very full-featured reference application.
Because
yeah, so we're going to go with kernel 123 bang.
Capitalize the first one, and we're good.
We're all good. So what was that? Kernel 123 bang. All right, again. Kernel 123 bang. All right, good. All right, so we're going to repeat it now. kernel, 1, 2, 3, bang. If I see that come through on any reference applications.
Yeah, please don't use your username and your password. Do as we say, not as we do.
We're going to go ahead. Yeah, right. We're going to go ahead and say sign up. Let's see if we get what we get. All right. We now have access to a user account. So we can go to my account.
Excellent. So this just used.
I need to log in. So, this is updating my account, not actually. So I can go ahead and add a new address here. So I can go ahead and say this is secret base, and it is in Alaska, because ain't nobody care if I'm up there. I'm going to go ahead and say this is in Juneau, but I can't remember how to. I'm going to go with Anchorage because I'm a lot more confident on my spelling of Anchorage. And I'm going to go with postal code. I have no idea. It's probably like I have no idea. Something around there, and then we're going to go with something like secret base street. All right, save that address, and we basically have this information. If I wanted to, I could actually make my account admin. I'm going to go ahead and now be able to access. Let's see, got a little bit of a redirect goof there. Actually, I think I have to see where that redirect. But basically, what we've done is we've added admin permissions to my user. I'll have to take a look to see what's happening there in a little bit. It's not so important to the specific area. Let's make an order real quick. We're going to go ahead and go with wearable smart devices. And these just look precious, so we're going to go with one of those.
I feel like we're getting down to like a whole secret agent,
right?
mad like fancy spy watch thing.
Exactly.
Vibe going.
Exactly. All right, we're going to go ahead and add that to the cart. And with this cart, we're going to go ahead and be able to check out now. And we're just testing to see how well all this stuff works out. So we got kernel panic. We have the address was pulled in from my account, which is great. I am uncertain if we actually have this set up with needing real Stripe fake data.
I think there's one that's 424242, etc.
Yeah. How many numbers?
16. Yeah, one more. There you go.
And
I think the dates can be anything.
Okay, we're going to go with.
I could be wrong. We'll find out. Can pull up the Stripe testing page real quick.
We're going to go with 1, 2, 3, and 1, 1, 1.
Yeah.
Let's
see if it works.
Doing something, maybe. Checking the network request. Doesn't seem like it wanted to go through. So there was a confirm error on the network request here to the Stripe API.
Okay, so that won't work.
So we can see. Well, I get it's a 404 error to the Stripe API.
Oh.
So we got the order 1. We got the order back. Well, we can skip past this because it's not so much the.
So I think we're gonna be talking more about the payment infrastructure
about the login,
in a future episode, right?
So exactly.
Something is going a little awry with that flow, but today I think since we're more focused on the auth, we can save that investigation for our payments episode, which folks can tune in and keep up with the data and API show on our fancy new page. hasura.io/community/data and API show. You can check out all the upcoming episodes and watch past episodes there and on YouTube, of course.
Yep. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the account that we created. We're going to have a look at then how that all went through, and we're going to see some of the data that got used to create those requests. So if we have a look at the specific, we're going to go ahead and go first. I'll look over at the actual infrastructure here. Go to the data, and then we'll have a look at what happens when the user's credentials are being passed around for creating orders. So what we have here is the user table, and we're going to just confirm that we actually got our user here. So we're going to do a search for our user here with the name, not equals, but contains, let's say, is like.
Mm-hmm.
Where is it? I don't see it.
There you go.
Is like. I like.
Oh,
yeah, there we go. Case insensitive. Here we go. Kernel. All right, run the query.
Oh.
So we're gonna do a.
When we do the email, we know what the email was. Yeah.
Yeah. But we could also do is remove this, and we can also just filter by the created at here. Need to remove that filter case. Run the query. So there we are. There's kernel panic.
Nice.
All right. So we have the ID. We have the kernel panic. We have the password, which is stored as a hash, and we have the refresh token that was generated and stored. And I don't think that they actually have any orders themselves. Did it actually create the orders? It might have created the order. So we have the order there from the actual account. Good.
Which is probably what you want, right? Because even if the order fails, you want to be able to make sure you know what's happening and like maybe send the user an email or something or contact them somehow.
Exactly.
So,
right.
Okay, so we just ran through. So we ran through. There's an action for signing up, right? Like that itself is one action, one behavior that we want.
Yep.
And then I imagine so for the placing an order, there's probably a little bit more complexity going on, which again we'll dig into with the payments and everything in the future. But then for the user authentication, we conceive of sign up as separate from login in the sense of they'll each have their own kind of handler, their own action to manage those.
Yes. So let's have a look at how that plumbing actually comes together. So we're going to go to the to our actions tab now, and here we have our sign up. And so let's have a look more in depth at what's actually happening here. So the first block we have is the action definition. This is where we're going to be modifying our GraphQL schema to accommodate for this new top level field that we want to expose on our API. And in this case, we have manually called this one sign up. Like we can give it whatever name we want to give it. And then we can give it a parameters input, again, of any name that we want to call it. So none of these have to be precious, right? I'm going to go ahead and just comment these out here. And we could say something like, this is going to be called my sign up. And this is going to be called values. And the sign up input is going to be called something new. And it's going to have to change the name down here. So all of this stuff inside of the actual mutation type. Mutation type is the one that's important to keep. And that's because we're using a mutation. We could make this be on the query route, but in this case, we're just going to have this action be for a mutation. So we're going to just say that whatever these values are in here, we can call it whatever we want, but it has to be consistent throughout then the rest of our handling of this behavior. So for us, in our case, what we have is that specific type mutation. And then we called it sign up parameters is then the sign up input. And I kind of usually like to do mine a bit more like that, just to make it a bit easier to read. But essentially, this is what you've got: is you got the sign up, the parameters, and the sign up input as the input type.
Mm-hmm.
So here, when we define then our input type for sign up input, again, we just have to make sure that it lines up, and the exclamation mark means it's required. We're saying that this input for this mutation will require a name, an email, and a password for sign up. Because if it was going to be a login, if we look at the login input, we don't actually need the name, we just need the email and password, because that's what we can guarantee uniqueness on. So we're going to go ahead and do with a sign up here. We're able to say that we require these 3 fields. And then on this response that we get, this JWT, we're able to identify the shape of what we're going to send back. Again, this is all arbitrary. This is whatever pattern you want to embrace and use. But in the case of sign up and login, fairly established patterns at this point, we're going to go ahead and say that the JWT will be including the name, the email, the token, and the refresh token field coming back off of that type.
Gotcha.
Is that making sense? Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So in terms of defining any action, when we go into this actions tab, we can create a new one. We can define, basically name it whatever we want, but we just have to define the action in terms of the operation that's going to be performed. In this case, a mutation, and in this case, we're gonna also define the types for the input that we need for that operation, and then perhaps optionally, but probably we're going to want to return something back. So then the type for whatever the output of that operation is going to be, and we configure those in the type configuration. And those are, again, kind of arbitrary based on our needs for this particular action. Is that an accurate recap?
Yeah. And so what we're going to do is we're going to trace this over to then where it's actually being handled. And then I think we should probably try to just maybe iterate a little bit on this existing pattern, so we can kind of show the ability to add, evolve, change the shape of this sort of a functionality. So
sounds great.
We've defined the actual API shape, the part that's exposed on the schema. We've defined the actual types that will be required there. And now we define the part where we actually handle that. Give me one moment here.
And so just as a reminder, like all of this code, if you check it out and run on GitHub, you'll get this UI that we're looking at now in the Hasura console. So folks can follow along at home if you'd like.
It's allergy season, people. At least if you're in my climate zone. All right. So we say here's the API actions and sign up. This is going to be the path to where we're wanting to handle this. This Next.js server URL is defined on that Docker Compose image underneath the Hasura instance. If we scroll up here, we can actually see the Next.js server URL is defined as an environment variable. In our case, simply the Next.js at 3000. If you're a Next.js user and you're wondering why is that not localhost, that's because for Docker networking, you need to use the name of the service that you've identified. In our case, we're actually running Next.js as a service itself. So if you scroll up here, I think a little bit more, under services, there's the Postgres service. And then I think I've got it collapsed, which is why I'm not finding it. There's Next.js. So it's the name of the service that you have to be able to work it with. So
we've got Next.js running the site as its own service, and then we've got a Hasura service that we're telling where to find Next.js.
Yeah, Docker Compose is networking these two together with a quick and dirty service level network. So that's where this, it is, because this environment variable you can then change, like in cloud, for example, to then point to where your live Vercel or Next.js project is running on the cloud. And so then you're able to simply just manipulate these things through environment variables, which is part of the beautiful CI/CD flow.
Love it.
We use synchronous, which means that we actually wait for and return the payload itself, as opposed to returning a ID that you would watch for the updated response. In most cases, you'll be using synchronous for your own projects as well. If we were wanting to like lock this down more, we could potentially add in something here, kind of like my secret token. And then we could do something like 123, and then we'd be able to validate against that at the actual Vercel instance. So we could actually be able to say this request to our auth service is only coming from Hasura Actions. So this is a way to be able to lock down and protect your various features. Another cool thing is forwarding client headers itself. So if you had, let's say, an auth service, if you were wanting to work with let's say it was like a Google Auth or something else, and you were wanting and the request coming in with the mutation was having all of the signatures from, let's say, a Google authorized environment or a Spotify auth token or something, you could then pass that token along with the payload and then be able to do actions with that token that you've somehow otherwise authorized on your client to be able to then interact with and access the content. So let's say you wanted to create your own Spotify player and you wanted to make very specific behaviors inside of an action, but you still needed to call the Spotify API from inside of those actions. You could auth with Spotify from the front end, totally isolated from Hasura, or make that an actual service itself, which is totally doable, and then be able to make actions, call actions that are being passed in that Hasura token. All right, my tongue is starting to like wrap around my head a couple of times. And, so
gotcha.
let's look at the login.
It gives you more kind of more capability of like customizing. Even if you're using external services, you can continue to pass through that same kind of authorization principle of making sure that these actions are locked down to only certain agents can talk to them.
So forwarding on the headers. Yeah. All right. Setting timeouts. And then we're not going to go into these today because we're dealing more with the custom business logic of where we're wanting to be able to manage these services ourselves. So we're doing custom business logic at our own service endpoints, where these services come into play here. And I think I can do the whole zoom in thing again. Where these services come into play is you have the ability to shape the request to what your maybe a REST service may be looking for. So if you had a specific endpoint already in place that required a very specifically shaped incoming request, you can modify that, change the payload, change all the inputs to be able to actually accommodate for that without having to have any sort of middleman proxy layer that is somehow manipulating or adapting the two connectors to each other. You could just call those services directly from the Hasura API, which is great because then you can expose other services on your same Hasura API and not be having to ship different APIs and libraries to your front-end developer.
Awesome. Less work, more better.
Right.
Yeah. And so just take a moment here. If folks listening have any questions, like please jump in the chat and share them with us. We'd love to know what you're thinking, or if you've used actions like this and have any learnings to share with the crowd, please do.
And before I go any further, we got to add some music back to the crowd. I turned it off earlier, but here we go. We got the.
Now it's a party.
Now we're going. Now it's a party. All right. So we have our services. So let's go ahead and track to see where this is actually happening. So again, if we were to come down inside of the pages directory of Vercel here, of Next.js, the pages directory exposes any folders here as top level roots, except if they are underneath the API folder. And in the API folder, anything in the API folder becomes these serverless routes that get hosted as functions, lambdas, that we get to be able to call from any other service on the web, wherever we want. And that's one of the really cool features about Next.js, which is why we like it so much.
Yeah.
So we're going to go ahead and look at the actions here. So there used to be an option in earlier versions of Hasura that used to show table relations. Could you please point to that option on graphical section, please? The table relations. So I'll just do a quick detour here, but with the table relations, we still have a table viewer. If you go to the actual the top level here for relationships, I'm not sure if you're referring to a different functionality that maybe predates my time, but this would be one of the primary spaces where you can identify and see the table permissions. You're saying in graphical, so I don't think that that's a functionality we have there, but
maybe referring to the Explorer thing that shows up on the side in cloud, perhaps.
Maybe. So we have this, which allows you to do that, but it used to show all the tables and relations. I kind of vaguely remember what it is you're describing. I don't think that is there anymore. Well, there is one area that maybe. Did we remove it? Voyager, which was the ability to kind of see the whole thing. That might have been removed. If I look at Hasura API,
I think
Voyager.
My Hasuration. Great. Yeah. So yeah, maybe we can.
There used to be a functionality called GraphQL. I think we had this built in. Yeah, the Voyager. Yeah. I think that might have gotten removed. It still is an existing service though, which is something that if people want to use, they can come in here and use this. We can kind of show what happens here. So if we were to go ahead and change the schema, we're going to do an introspection schema. We'll copy the introspection query, go back over to our own layer here, paste that in, run the introspection, take the payload, run back over to the Voyager and paste this in, and then display that. And then you get this like wild graph of basically everything that shows all of the relationships. This like I said, this is a relatively production grade data model, so it's pretty hefty. There's admin services and front end services, but yeah,
it's a useful feature for being able to explore that. Very cool.
We'll drop that in chat for the people.
Yeah, apis.guru, is it? Oh, you got it. Okay.
Yeah. All right. So, anyways, back to our actions, and we're going to go ahead and look at the code of what we're running. So we have inside of the actions, we're going to go specifically to the log or to the sign up action. And we're going to go here inside of the index.ts file here. And let's just do a top to bottom code walkthrough what it is that we're working at. And so you've got the top level handler, which is basically just the declaration of the NC typed backend handler for Next.js. So Next Connect is the library, and then you've got the check message function that basically is just essentially returning code if it says okay. Does the message exist on the various possible responses? So essentially, you just got a bunch of little handlers here, little methods that just help us with the handling of our code. So we have this check message implementing, uniqueness violation. Does that message happen to be appearing in the errors? Because with GraphQL, we're not going to take a side on this argument today, but errors are success. So getting an error. An error object will yield a 200 unless it's a server error. Then you get a proper HTTP code. But if it's a backend error, it will yield a successful HTTP error along with the error message. So we're not going to take a side on that conversation right now. There are pros and cons to both sides. But we're going to go ahead and say what happens is when this sign up, when the request comes in. So we got the request body that's coming in, and then we're immediately reading off of that request body, the request body.input. This is the part that's going to come in every single time. So request body.input, that always comes in. And then we have the params, and that is that unique name that we provided for our input. Again, it could be whatever we want it to be, but we went with params. So that's the value that we're reading off of. And so from here, we have the actual mutation that we're wanting to then run based off of this input, and that is creating a new user back at Hasura. So using Hasura's actions, and from within Hasura, actually calling back over to Hasura to be able to insert a user for this sign up request. Now, what we do here, again, like we mentioned before, is we have this kind of funky abstracted syntax, which is, again, that GraphQL Zeus. We talked about this last week. If we were to replicate this functionality in GraphQL land, just to validate this here, so we would be able to run something like mutation and then insert user one. And then we're going to put in an object. And then we're going to put in something kind of like, the name is going to be one thing. Now we hit the part where you have to live type and everything goes to pot. Then we're going to do the email. And then we're going to do the password. And then we're going to return the ID of what we're getting. So if we look back at our code now, so this is like the GraphQL equivalent. And if we look back at our key here, what we're doing is we say, wait, we have the insert user one. This is the input of that mutation. So it's the object with name, email, password. Oh, and we had a refresh token. Actually, that's the, that is the response.
That would be, yeah.
That is the creation of a unique UUID when we create it. So we have the refresh token being created at sign up. So this is the first refresh token that is going to be used to validate our user going forward. So this is not a field we input. This is a field that gets automatically generated here. We could provide one here ourselves, and random bits, which would never validate. That's butts, not bits.
The way we've written it, that wouldn't really be used by the handler, right? It's not looking for the refresh token in the params.
Right. Well, the handler part doesn't care up to this point, right? So the handler part just sends in the request, and now we're using this insert user one mutation, which is not part of our handler anymore. This is a totally different auto-generated. Yeah, this is an auto-generated Hasura endpoint for the fact that we have a table called users, or user. And in this case, we're going to use the inserting into that user a specific item where we say, and this is again the custom behavior, right? So we're saying we're going to use a name, an email, and a password, and we want to be able to pass in a refresh token that we need to somehow define as a valid UUID.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're going to return the fields off of that table. The ID, the name, the email is true, and the refresh token is true, which is in this case is just saying, this is because it's the JSON syntax. It's just saying return to me name, email, and refresh token, and that is the equivalent here on the ID. So these are equivalent queries to what we've written here.
But so this goes to show that like the structure, the shape of our action doesn't necessarily have to match the shape of our tables, APIs, sort of the way we directly interact with different parts of the system via an API directly. Like the action can be, that's where like the custom functionality can be baked in, and we can manipulate what we need to manipulate from how the users or whatever parts of the system are interacting with it, and map that however we need to onto the API that Hasura exposes from our data. Is that right?
Right, because what we can do then nicely is we can say, well, once we've run this mutation And then we actually look at the response coming back. So we get the response from the GraphQL request. We have then the data response, which is this insert user one response. And we're looking to make sure that we actually get a user object, not an error. If we get the error back, we look to see what the error might be, and that could be that this is not this is a unique violation, so you already have an account. We want to be able to handle this sort of a checks and behavior behind the wall. We don't want to actually be surfacing these errors directly to the client, because this is not something that you're wanting to do. We want to maybe have, fail to ban behaviors or something else that are happening inside of our server that are not going to allow somebody to sit there all day and just whenever they want to just check our database for users. So this allows us to be able to implement custom behavior, custom logic, whatever we would want to do for the right sort of practices here inside of this action, while still using the Hasura primitives to manipulate our database. We expose a service that says, okay, I'm going to accept some inputs. And then with those inputs, I will then again use Hasura to write this information back into my database and be able to update and generate things. And so from here, if we have the user, we go ahead and we actually generate the proper token. So we generate a JWT with all of the different shapes that would need to be used. We set that as a cookie on the response, and then that gets sent back. In this case, we're actually doing it twice. People may have noticed this in the Super App. We added them both just to be able to support the use cases of when those would want to use a server-side cookie versus those that would want to use a JWT. You can do both. And also in Hasura, we support the ability for multiple JWT tokens now, so you could actually literally support both. But in this case, we just send back the token once as a cookie and also once as an actual JSON object on the user itself. And so we send the data back, and then we end up back over at Hasura land, where we actually then get the refresh token generated back for us from the request that we send in.
Cool.
For a sign up. Yeah.
So in this case, those two approaches are a little bit redundant. It sounds like we don't
these
need
two. Yeah,
we
could totally remove that and we could just not do the cookie version at all. So we have just the response with the JSON object and put the refresh token on the response object. That's how the majority of this code base works. The cookie was one that we had included and left on.
Sure. So are there what would be motivations for either of those approaches?
Well, this is a side trip into JWT land, but it depends on the level of security you want to implement. And I am literally regurgitating what was written in our Ultimate Guide to JWT's blog post, which is a fantastic reference. But one of the better approaches to take is you will send a JWT token back to the server. So you send the JWT if I remember correctly, the JWT lives inside of the actual state, and then you are including another token in an alternative token inside of the cookie that is encrypted, and then the plain text is a HTTP only cookie or something of that matter, where then you'd be able to essentially check in this action here, like in a login action, you could check, does the server only cookie match the decrypted cookie off of my header? And if those two match, then I can parse this JWT because I can trust that nobody was messing with the actual JWT payload. Like it gets deep. So
awesome. So yeah, that was a great TLDR, and folks can go onto the blog and the docs as well, right? To read more details about this. So I think this is that's that link again. The ultimate guide to using JWT in GraphQL.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I've also heard pronounced jot. I don't know what the linguistic motivations for that were, but in case folks have heard that word around. And then we also have some good docs on authentication with JWT as well. So folks can check out those resources for more about how all this works.
Yeah, let's try to iterate just a tiny piece here in the remaining time that we have. And let's say that for our sign up behavior, we wanted to include a custom message for we wanted to include a custom message for the response back, right? So we're going to go ahead and implement now a behavior for some kind of like whenever you sign up, we send you a randomized message that is uniquely yours. Okay. We're going to go to the actions and we're going to go to the sign up behavior here. And underneath the sign up behavior, what we're going to say is that the response will be accepting a message, and that's going to be of type string, and we're going to leave that as optional. We're not going to make this to be a required field. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to say save this now. And when we have the save here, so we're going to go ahead and have a quick verification over in our metadata that this actually is getting tracked. So we go to metadata, we go to our actions. We can see now that the behavior for our sign up, if we get down to sign up, actually it's going to be underneath our types, our actions GraphQL. So if we go to the JWT, we can see now that we have message showing up as on our types or supported types. So metadata is tracking. Very good.
Nice.
We're going to come back over to our server now, and we're going to say at that handler underneath this code here, when we send this response back, we're going to do a message field now called "You are awesome." That is your random message.
I love it.
And so
some little affirmations.
Some positive affirmations here.
Yes.
So now we have this text coming in here, and with those two changes, now if we go back to our login here, we can go ahead and look at our API Explorer. And if we go to the history tab here to bring up, did I actually keep the history tab or probably not? Probably have to do this again. Okay, that's fine. If we go ahead and actually make a new user now, we can actually run this test. We say mutation, and we're going to go ahead and say insert or sign up, and we're going to give it the params that it's looking for. So we're going to go ahead and say a name is Jojo, email is Jojo at Hasura.io, because I don't know, we might get a Jojo someday, but we're not going to get a Jojo. And we're going to say password is 123, which we're going to get a validation error, probably if we validate on the server. I'm not sure. So we're going to say ABC 123 exclamation mark. And from there, we don't actually have any more required input parameters. So we're going to then look at the response, and we get the email, the name, and we're going to probably have to refresh to be able to actually see the message. So I'm going to go and copy that and just refresh here real quick. And then if we look down here, we should now see message.
Yeah, nice.
And if we run this request, we'll actually get that update from our server. And we get the message back, "You are awesome." Now, that's great because we like that kind of positive affirmation, like you said. If we look at our front end code here, so we just wrap this up here. If we go to the sign up behavior for the account, and we can see that we're using this input parameter. Now, if I was trying to read the message off of here, I'm not going to be able to actually see anything. It's going to say, "Hey, I have no idea about message," right? It's going to say there's a problem with your code. Well, usually I should say there's a problem with the code because it's not aware of the actual API. If I have a look here at the use typed mutation, sign up, and so here it is. it's seeing the response, but it's not aware of like what this is supposed to be. So if I were to generate my client code, which is the thing that we were doing for our actual unique client here, I'm going to go to the README here, which should tell me how to re-update my client code. And we look at clients. See where that code is at real quick. The project using Innovative K. It's probably underneath my package JSON here. If I look at the bit here, let me just see where my package. Let's just pull it up.
Sounds like there's some docs in that util.
So this is the generate GQL client here. So now if I go into here and I open up a new utility here, and I go ahead and I say npm, I think I have yarn actually, yeah. Yarn run the generate GQL client. I probably need to go inside of the www folder first. I'll say, why is it not aware of what I'm trying to do here? Go inside the www folder. And now we can do yarn generate.
Does it need to be in the util folder?
Run
no.
GQL client. It's running that command, and now it's generated the new SDK here, where it should, if I go to the sign up field now, it should actually be aware of the output here underneath this token refresh token. And see, now you can see that it's actually prompting me for the message property that's available on my GraphQL schema. Nice. Which is the behavior I was expecting. Yeah, so this is a really cool. How do you even read me on VS Code, right? So that is kind of a bit of the flow. So where we take the actions, we can iterate inside of the server, we can iterate on the types that it's expecting, and then using some sort of a generated client library, you're able to then quickly iterate on what it is that you're expecting. And this is where we can really bury a lot of custom behavior, uniqueness checks, generating JWTs, whatever you would need to do for a custom use case. We'll be able to do all that inside of an action and then expose that to the client, and not all of the complicated 2 or 3 multiple steps that we were using with the Hasura API to read, write, and mutate the database. That's all still super handy from the server side. Because Hasura makes it easy, but we want to make that into one step for the client to be able to implement a sign-up behavior. And that's why actions come in really handy, and that's kind of having this deep dive look at sort of what this specific custom behavior is doing inside of Hasura with actions.
Awesome. So we can use this to also kind of like understand the other side of things, so like login after folks have signed up already, and I don't know, any other sort of functionality we might need. I think in this case it's just signing up and logging in, right? But
yeah, but it could be calculating tax, right? It could be looking for could be checking, really hot commodity items if we still have inventory first. It could be a number of things that you would want to implement that require business logic. And that's where your product starts to differentiate from somebody else, because you're implementing something that nobody else has. What does a one-click payment look like now that Amazon's lost its patent on that? Like, how do you want to implement that as an action or something else of those natures? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, so folks can explore all the other actions in that API actions directory, right, to sort of get a sense of how some of these different workflows or behaviors have been implemented in the reference app, and hopefully that gives some good inspiration for whatever you're trying to build.
Right.
Awesome. This is great.
So next week, what do we got?
Next week, we have a sort of a special format next week, don't we?
We do.
We're
yeah. Next week will be a pre-recorded show, but one of us or both of us will be live in chat. So we'll be there
Yes.
to answer the questions and be able to respond to things live. But we will pre-record the show because there's a very rare conflict of timing where we're going to have to be able to just say, okay, that has to happen, and then we're going to be implementing. We're going to be upgrading from an action to a REST connector and looking at what
Yeah.
the difference of those actually are. So when we looked at all those buttons and those different functionalities that they do, we're going to look at, okay, what does a REST connector do that is different than from an actual action itself?
So, and we'll be looking at that in the context of so what we sort of touched on at the beginning, setting up the payments workflow, right? Is that
Right.
that's the theme that
That is the
we'll
plan.
be exploring these REST connectors through. So yeah, so if folks are curious about that and about how to interact with other services that have REST APIs set up, whether they're your own or external services like Stripe or what have you, that'll be the show to check out. So yeah, all of our upcoming episodes are on the Data and API Show page. And of course, you can subscribe and set up reminders on YouTube to be notified when we're going live. Yeah, so we'll hope to see you all in the chat next week. And anything else we want to remind folks of before signing off?
I think that's going to be all of it.
Awesome. So we do have one more question, I think, before we call it a day. So can this be used to run a few more mutations along with the intended action?
Yes, but don't do it. so one behavior for one action. While it may be that there's a couple of mutations that encapsulate that behavior, such as creating a user or looking to see if a user exists and then inserting something into that user, where that might be the case, go ahead and do that. Otherwise, keep your side effects into effects and try to avoid anything that would be causing side effects inside of your actions. Another question being, can you use JavaScript? Any function, any language you want to use. We use TypeScript here, but you can use JavaScript, you can use Go. Anything that'll resolve an HTTP request wherever you want to host it can work with just fine.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one more.
We got questions. All right, we got some questions. Land the questions. That's good. So the other question was, what if you had to update a few?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, would you want to encapsulate everything in one action? Like if, I guess for a single behavior, if you needed to touch a few different tables in order to make that happen, like I don't know, an example isn't immediately coming to mind, but would that be, I guess this is sort of like an architectural question, right? Like what is...
So there's a couple of things here, right? So in DBA terms, you would, let's say if you were deleting something, like you would start to implement cascade logic on the database itself, so that if a behavior on if you have two tables that are so tightly related that you would need to have them very specifically reflect changes on the other, then I would just architect my database to behave that way. So if it's like deleting some off of this, for example, deleting a order item or like a metadata or something, and needs to delete the main map, I don't know, then you would want to have your database actually reflect that logic, because that's just good, clean databases. And that's the thing, is Hasura is just sitting on your database. So anything that's still good database practice, implement at the database level. Now, there are cases where there may be something that is, again, part of your business logic that is really critical, that's not something that you can necessarily cleanly architect in a DB. And in that case, I would really consider relying on events, where you would have an asynchronous event here and an asynchronous action that would say, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to this is a terrible example, I don't know what came to mind, but I'm going to remove this student from the class body because they're moving on to a different school or something else, and now I need to update all of the different classrooms where they've got a seat and I've got to notify teachers and whatever else. I would figure out what's the tip of my cascade, do the behavior there, and then I have events watching that behavior that then go down the chain and be able to say, okay, now that that's true, update this. If that's true and something changed here, update the next thing, moving on. So yes, canceling order should update shipping status and also notify user. Absolutely an event. Absolutely an event. So if you cancel an order, trigger an event. We actually had a show a little while back featuring Temporal, which actually talked about some sort of a like order management system. That would be kind of an interesting use case where you could be able to talk about maybe triggering like these services or these events happening in a tertiary system that would then be able to send text messages to users or whatever else might be the case. Yeah.
Gotcha. Cool. So yeah.
One more question. We have one more, and if we don't, then we're gonna wrap it.
I think unless anybody has a last minute one, I think we've gotten through all of them.
Going once, twice. All right.
Yeah, and reminder that folks can check out all those past episodes, including the temporal one, on our YouTube channel and also on our show page right there at hasura.io/community/data and API show. So if you want to pour through the archives, you can find past episodes in a playlist on YouTube and link there.
And tell your friends.
Yes. Exactly. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, Jesse, for explaining and walking us through all of this. I think
Thanks for the great questions.
I'm learning a lot.
Yeah.
I hope everybody else is too. So yeah, thanks a lot, everybody, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week. Bye.